You ever have that feeling where a company just gets you? Like their products, their ads, they just seem perfectly made for you? Well, I can tell you it's not magic, it's data. And that is the incredible power of customer segmentation. Today, we are going to dive into how businesses find their tribe in a huge sea of consumers. This old marketing saying pretty much hits the nail on the head. I mean, if you try to appeal to absolutely everyone all at once, you usually end up not really appealing to anyone. And that is the exact problem that segmentation was created to solve. So, how did we even get to this point? For a really long time, the name of the game was mass production, mass marketing. Just make one thing and sell it to everybody. But today's world, it's completely different. That old one-size-fits-all idea has been totally left in the dust. Just think about the original Ford Model T. Henry Ford famously said you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. That was the absolute peak of the mass market era. Now fast forward to today and walk into any car dealership. You've got SUVs for big families, zippy sports cars for enthusiasts, electric cars for people who are eco-conscious. Companies figured out that making different things for different people wasn't just a nice idea. It was the secret to survival. Okay, so that brings us to the how. For decades, marketers would sort customers using these really broad, obvious traits. But modern data analysis has completely flipped the script, moving us from making, educated guesses to letting algorithms actually discover the groups for us. So traditionally, segmentation was built on these four big pillars. You had demographics, who your customers are, their age, gender, and so on. Geographic, where they live. Psychographic, what they think and what they value. And finally, behavioral, how they actually act, what they buy. And look, these are still super useful, but the catch is they often rely on marketers guessing which of these categories really matters the most. But now we have cluster analysis. And the most important word on this slide is unsupervised. That means we don't go in and tell the machine what the groups are supposed to be. Nope. Instead, we just feed it all the data we have, and we let the algorithm itself find the natural, sometimes hidden groupings of customers based on what they have in common. This slide really breaks down the difference perfectly. The old way, a priori, is kind of like sorting a deck of cards into the four suits you already know exist: hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. But the new way, post hoc, the data-driven way, is like throwing all the cards on a table and letting a machine find the most meaningful piles on its own, based on patterns you might never have even thought to look for. Now, all this might sound a little bit like techno-magic, but I promise you it's not. So let's pull back the curtain just a little bit on one of the most common clustering algorithms to see how a machine actually finds these groups all by itself. So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? If we're not giving it any rules, how in the world does it know where to even begin? Well, the answer is actually a pretty simple, elegant process of just refining its guesses over and over again. Let's walk through a popular algorithm called k-means. First, the machine just randomly drops a few starting points, we call them centroids, among all your customer data. Just picture them like planting a few flags on a giant map of customers. Second, it looks at every single customer and assigns them to whichever flag is closest. Third, and this is the really clever part, it moves each flag to the dead center of the little group it just created, and then it just does it again, and again, and again. It repeats those last two steps until the groups are stable and the flags stop moving. And just like that, the data itself has shown you its hidden segments. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so that's the theory. Theory is great, but what does this actually look like in the real world? How does finding these groups translate into actual business success? Let's check out a few real-world examples. All right, first up, a major beverage company. They had a bunch of different vodka brands, but they were worried that their own brands were just stealing customers from each other. It's a problem we call cannibalization. Basically, you're just competing with yourself. So by using segmentation, they were able to identify these really distinct customer groups. You had, say, the social entertainer who buys for parties versus the at-home connoisseur who sips a nice drink after work. This let them aim each brand's marketing, its flavor, its price to a totally specific segment. And that made sure each brand had its own unique tribe to talk to. Here's another case. The pork industry wanted to get past just selling a product. They wanted to understand why and when people were eating pork. They needed to get a much deeper look into what was really motivating people. So what did the research find? all these different segments with totally different needs. One group, for example, saw pork as the star of a weekend barbecue with friends. Another group was just looking for a quick meal for the family on a Tuesday night. This let them create these really targeted campaigns, positioning, say, pork chops very differently than pulled pork, aiming them at different people and different occasions. And for our last example, let's look at a home fragrance company. They had a feeling they weren't really connecting with multicultural consumers, and they wanted to understand the unique attitudes and emotions tied to scents in different cultures. And what they found was fascinating. This segmentation study uncovered these really deep insights, not just about what people were buying, but about the specific emotional connections to fragrance. Things like linking certain smells to family, or to a celebration, or to a sense of peace. This didn't just help their marketing, it opened up totally new avenues for product innovation. So, we've seen just how powerful this approach can be, but where's it all headed? Well, the tools are getting even smarter, even more sophisticated. But it's also really important to remember that no single technique is ever perfect. Now this is a glimpse into the next frontier. Instead of just using sales data, new research is showing that we can analyze thousands and thousands of online product reviews. And this lets us segment customers based on their unsatisfied needs. We can actually find groups of people who are all wishing a product had better battery life, or that an app was easier to use. This opens the door for hyper-targeted product development. But of course, like any tool, it's got its challenges. The huge advantage for sure is that cluster analysis finds these natural, unbiased groups right from your data. But it's not a silver bullet. A human still has to make a tough call on the right number of clusters to look for. And the algorithms can sometimes get thrown off by outliers. A few really extreme customers can sometimes warp the results. And that kind of brings us to our final thought for today. Segmentation is an absolutely incredible tool for understanding the patterns that connect all of us. It helps businesses serve their customers better by finding those common threads. But as the technology gets more and more precise, it brings up a really interesting question for all of us. As we get better and better at grouping people, how do we make sure we also get better at seeing them and treating them as individuals?